Welcome to the Doktor O'Kay Show. I am Doktor O'Kay, and this is Raw from Dallas, Texas, where our main headline is, just keep being a real jackknife. But we'll get to that in a minute, and let's start with the matches. So we just keep leading that locker room as Rey Mysterio avoids a boom drop and rolls up Kofi Kingston to get a cheer out of everyone in the back. So Rey is the ones, and he had a couple nice moves with the Hurricane Rana into the steel steps early in the match, and then later he landed his second 619 attempt to get right back into the win column at 1-1 in one-on-one matches in Kofi and his first matchup in 16 long years. So that means Kingston is the twos, and after unsuccessfully paying off JBL to say good things about the New Day, Woods grabbed Rey's legs to stop a first 619 attempt, which got him ejected, and it will also get him a 1-week suspension. And then Kofi missed a Trouble in Paradise and also a boom drop to get caught with a loss, and he starts 2025 pretty much the same way that he ended 2024 and takes another loss to go to 0-1. But I will say that I thought we'd see a little bit more out of the New Day with their attitude adjustment, but for now, I guess not, so this gets a not okay. Up next, we just keep wondering why this wasn't on SmackDown as Bayley and Nia battled one more time, with Nia outlasting Bayley with a pop-up Samoan drop, a senton, and an annihilator to finish her off. So Nia is the ones, and apparently she just wants to be on every single show, and she found herself up against a familiar foe in this one, and she worked Bayley's injured left shoulder that was hurt on SmackDown, and it ended up getting her the same result as at SummerSlam and at Bad Blood. And Nia's somehow already had 5 total matches in 2025 already, but she is 2-1 in one-on-one matchups. That means Bayley is the twos, and she announced that she's moving to Raw full-time in the transfer window, which is really strange because that means she is willingly deciding to put herself on the same show as Damage Control. And after losing to Tiffy on SmackDown, does that mean she thinks Rhea is going to be an easier target to win the title against? That just seems a little crazy to me. I don't know. Anyways, back to the match. She got distracted yet again by Roxanne Perez, who was sitting in the front row, and then Roxanne swung at Bayley, but Bayley caught her, and Roxanne had to be restrained by some security guards, so Roxanne will pick up a fine. So for Bayley, back to the task at hand, she did land a nice sunset flip powerbomb on the apron and then an annihilator of her own, but even BBL Bayley doesn't quite have the same oomph on her annihilator as the real deal does. And then later in the match, she then again had a sunset flip powerbomb off of the turnbuckle this time, and then followed that up with an elbow drop, but it was still not enough to put Nia away. So she takes the loss and takes 2 L's in 2 straight shows, and that makes her 0-2 so far this year. Now before the show started, Nia blindsided Rhea just to try to get back to her from last week, so Nia will get a 1-week suspension for that. And then immediately after the match, Rhea ran down the ramp to get some revenge of her own on Nia, and she of course started a brawl, but it had to be broken up by WWE officials, and Rhea stood on top of the announce table and called out Nia for a match at Saturday night's main event, and sure enough, that was granted by Adam Pearce, so Rhea will have to get a fine for instigating that attack. Now, we did not really need to see this match one more time, but it was admittedly a strong performance by both women, so we'll give it an okay. Up third, we just keep being the sacrificial lamb as Penta finished off Pete Dunne with a sacrifice and a Penta bomb to get 2 wins in 2 weeks. So Penta is again the ones with another impressive battle that was highlighted by a super kick into a Mexican destroyer and then a tope con hilo. So he gets the win to go to 2-0. Now Pete Dunne, he is the twos, and he was admittedly on top of his game as well, and he had his usual joint manipulations throughout the match, and he also had some sort of destroyer of his own, and he tried to put in a triangle hold, but it was unsuccessful, and he got hit with a backbreaker that led to the finish, so he is 0-1 in 2025. And other than continuing to wonder how the Canadian or Mexican destroyer is a legal move while the pile driver is not, we still have to give this a double okay. In our fourth match, we just keep going to the sky and Kai as Io smartly got out of a Kirifuda clutch by diving between the ropes and then finished off Shayna with an over the moonsault. So this damage control duo gets their first win since January of 2023. So yeah, Kai and Sky are the ones, and they were a little rusty early on, but Io landed a nice dropkick and then a bullet train to get them on track before Io finished it off with that over the moonsault. So despite being two-time champions, those two had not been in a traditional tag since April of 2023, but maybe that's the way they need to go in 2025, as they are 1-0. And that means Zoe and Shayna are the twos, and Zoe immediately rocked Dakota's world with a devastating missile drop kick, so much so that I thought she might just have a concussion. But the match continued, and Shayna then wrenched Dakota's leg for a really long time, but she did eventually get out of it. And Sonya was not even effective as she tried to distract Io, but Dakota swept her legs off of the apron, and somehow these two have a 7-match losing streak after being so good throughout the early parts of 2024, so they go to 0-1 in 2025. Now, following Penta and Dunne was admittedly a tough act to follow, but this match didn't quite seem to have it together, so it's gonna get a double, not okay. And then in our main headline and main event, we just keep being a jackknife as Drew McIntyre rightly points out that he and Rollins want the same thing, but Rollins is too selfish for them to work together. And in this one, it cost McIntyre as Rollins was able to flip right on over top to him and enter into a jackknife cover to get the win. So Rollins is the ones, and he was basically the countering king in this match, which ultimately was the thing that got him the win because he was unable to land most of his own big moves throughout the match except for a Falcon Arrow, but even then he was too tired to make a good cover on the McIntyre, but he really needed this win after losing the Punk a couple weeks ago, so he goes to 1-1. And McIntyre is the twos, and he somehow took a superplex, but was still able to counter a Falcon Arrow with a Michinoku driver of his own, and he also ended a reverse fest with a clothesline, and later had a Future Shock DDT, but it was Rollins' jackknife that got the better of him in this one, so he's quickly and surprisingly dropped to 0-2 to begin 2025. And with this second straight loss, you can imagine that McIntyre was not pleased, so he immediately started to ground and pound Rollins after the match, and he chased the ref from the ring so that he could land a Claymore that he just was not able to do during the match. So Sami Zayn ran down to help out Rollins, and McIntyre eventually threw Zayn into the barricade, so he went right back to work onto Rollins, only to duck out of the way when Zayn went for a haluva kick and it hit Rollins right square in the face. So McIntyre rolled out of the ring and laughed to end the show. And of course, McIntyre started this one, so he's the one that will get a fine. But it was not exactly the match we expected, but admittedly still pretty good, so it gets an okay. And with that, let's go beyond the mat for Raw, and Jey Uso started the show with about 10 minutes worth of yeeting. And seriously now, Michael Cole needs to be stopped, as this is giving us all second-hand embarrassment. Ugh. That by itself deserves a double not okay, but we'll get to that here momentarily, as Gunther immediately interrupted Jey once he finally started talking, calling Jey a funny little man and a complete dork, and he will expose him as a flash in the pan. and also said that Jey doesn't deserve to be this close to the World Heavyweight title, and Jey surprisingly agreed with everything that Gunther said. So what are we doing here, Jey? Why are you doing this? Well, nonetheless, Jey countered by saying that he's the only one of those two that has been in a WrestleMania main event, so that caused Gunther to go off, and he swung at Jey, but Jey turned it around and landed a super kick to get Gunther out of the ring to end this one. Gunther started it, so he's the one that's going to get a fine. But again, what are we doing here if Jey's agreeing? It has to get a double not okay. Chad Gable told Kathy Kelly that he has a luchador problem, so he went to the Judgment Day's clubhouse and got a piece of paper from Dom, who said that this would be able to help him. But then after Gable left, Dunne said that they're supposed to have a tag team title rematch next week against the War Raiders, but Finn Balor won't be able to be there. So Dom stepped on up to the plate and said that he would be willing to take Balor's place next week, and they all agreed that this would be a good idea. And then Liv repeated that she's not mad at Dom, but Dom said that he'll still make it up to her. But speaking of tag titles, the Creeds also told Kathy Kelly that they'll be aiming for the War Raiders, and then Ivy said that she will be going for the Women's Intercontinental title. And when we put all of that together, still not much of that was interesting at all, at least yet, so it gets a not okay. Lyra Valkyria was supposed to be there, but she wasn't, and we just got a vignette instead where she said she'll be a fighting Women's Intercontinental Champion, which is great and all, but for today, very disappointing and a double not okay. Sami Zayn came out to the middle of the ring where he immediately declared himself for the Royal Rumble and said that he doesn't need a World Heavyweight Championship to make his career, but he sure does want it. And then KO came out to interrupt him and said that he was pretty upset at Sami at first, but he realized that this is not like Cody, and also admitted that he's done a lot of bad things to Zayn, and Zayn still found a way to forgive him. And so he yet again called Zayn his best friend, which I will admit is pretty surprising considering that he just called him his former best friend on Friday Night SmackDown. But much like on SmackDown, he said that Zayn can and will win the Royal Rumble, and then those two can accomplish one more thing together, which is main event WrestleMania for the WWE Championship. And he knows both of these things will happen because he has Sami's back, and he knows that Sami will have his. And yeah, that does sound like something a best friend would do. And yeah, if Zayn can find it in him to help a tyrant win something, surely he can help his best friend do the same, right? So yeah, I think KO is playing 4D chess here while the rest of the roster is just playing tic-tac-toe. So KO, yet again, man, you got it right, as always. Double okay. And later on, Zayn also caught up to Seth Rollins saying that he needed to hear that last week, but they both said that they will certainly throw the other out of the Royal Rumble. Sure, of course, we expect that, but more interesting, Karrion Kross was creeping in the background here, so is one of those two his next target? Sounds interesting. We'll give it an okay. Kathy also interviewed Sheamus, and he said that he's been chasing that IC title for 5 years, but finally now the stars are aligned for him. And so, as you would guess, Braun Breakker interrupted that interview, and he said that this is as close as he'll ever get to that title, and he's going to break him like an old man. But Sheamus didn't really like this. He pushed him, but admittedly no damage, and Breakker just laughed it off and walked away. This is all we got for an IC title match in 3 weeks of Netflix Raws? No. Double not okay. Logan Paul is finally set to appear next week, but today we got yet another vignette where he says that when he does something, he becomes the best at it, and he's going to eat, sleep, and breathe wrestling until he's the GOAT. Well, if that's true, good luck, Logan. We're wishing you the best and give you an okay. Jackie Redmond interviewed Punk at the top of the stands, and he said that history is what makes this Royal Rumble different than any other? Well, that's weird. He also decided to call out 5 superstars: John Cena, Roman Reigns, Drew McIntyre, Sami Zayn, and even Hulk Hogan. So I guess he didn't like that Real American Beer promo either a couple weeks ago. Well, the only interesting note is that he is calling in a favor or two if he needs to, but they can't all be pipe bombs, so this is getting a not okay. And I don't need to call in a favor, but if you missed all of the grades from Friday Night SmackDown, be sure to go right on over here to check that out. But if you don't, just like Bayley switching brands, this is getting a not okay.